This version of NZG's Liebherr 855 crawler crane is model number 72805. It's in the colours of the foundation specialist Soletanche Bachy, which is part of the giant Vancy group. Vancy is a French construction services company with interests worldwide. It comes in a standard Liebherr branded box which shows the dragline version of the crane, but in fact the parts needed to make the dragline aren't included. This is just the lift crane version, and that's probably because Soletanche Bachy don't do dragline work. The model comes tightly packed in two trays, with the top section having the boom pieces and also counterweight parts. And in the bottom section is the crane and some other small parts. As you can see, soft paper is used to protect the paintwork from rubbing on the box. Once the crane is out of the box, there's a few more bits of wrapping to take off, and that includes some strange cling film from the crawler tracks, which feels a little bit like unwrapping food from a supermarket. Of course, the crane isn't really edible, so don't try eating it at home. There's an elastic band to take off at the back, and that was holding the exhaust pipe in place, and there's also some wrapping to undo on the A-frame. But the overall impression is that this is a high quality model that's well packaged. And as another example of that, here are the pendant lines, which come in their own soft paper wrapping and they're nicely taped to a piece of cardboard. There's a fair bit of assembly to do to put the model together, and it does come with a couple of good instruction sheets. They're written in German and English, and they're good quality with good photos, and the only thing missing is a parts list. They describe the assembly of the crane, and on the other side there is the details of the dragline, although that's not relevant to this version of the model. There's also a separate small sheet, and that covers the reeving of the A-frame. So let's get straight on and begin by reeving the A-frame. Now, reeving up or stringing up crane models is one of those things that can lead grown men to cry. Some even end up in mental institutions where they spend the rest of their days making model review videos. In fact, the good news about this model is that reeving the A-frame isn't actually too difficult. There's no gap between the pulleys for the thread to fall onto, so really it's just a matter of going up and down and following the instructions, and there should be no call whatsoever for the use of any bad language. Once the thread's gone up and down over the pulleys, it's then threaded through the tying off point. After making a knot, the loose end can be snipped off to tidy it all up. With the A-frame fully reeved up, we can then set about putting it to work, and you can use one of the special keys provided to turn the winch through the open door. Select the optional CranesEtcTV power boost function and the A-frame quickly moves. The review model was a little bit short of thread on the winch drum to lower the A-frame fully to make a good transport load, but you can hook up the boom to display the model as if it had just come off a low loader. There are a number of boom sections to be joined up to make the full boom, and they're all metal and nicely made. And they just interlock at the connecting points, and it's a good fit. To secure the connections, you use tiny brass nuts and bolts, and there are two special tools provided so that you can do that. And the nice thing about this part of the process is that it feels like precision model engineering. Even though the nuts and bolts are very small, they are strong, but there's no need to over tighten them. Once they are joined up, they make a good strong connection. Moving to the back end, the counterweight is also a nicely engineered set of parts. Each block is a separate metal part and they loosely interlock. It does mean, however, that they would be a bit too loose if they were just left stacked on the counterweight plate. So to get around that issue, NZG provide 3 sets of different lengths of clip, and as we're using the maximum counterweight at the moment, we'll use the longest clip, and it just pops in through the holes in the blocks and provides some security. The real crane is self-ballasting, so it can attach its own counterweight, and it does that using lifting chains hanging from hydraulic cylinders. The lifting rams are modelled and they just push into place on the cylinders. Once it's all set, the real crane would reverse up, the chains would be hooked on, and the rams would lift the counterweight into place. To fit the counterweight to the crane in the 150 scale world, it's best to take the blocks off, and then the plate can be lifted up and eased into position. Once it's in place, you then secure it with a small steel pin, and that locks it into place nicely and stops the whole lot crashing down when you load up the counterweight. There's one other thing you can do to get the model to look right, and that's to hook on the lifting chains onto the counterweight tray. It's a bit of a fiddly job, but you know you're worth it. Once it's all chained up, you can then replace the 2 stacks of blocks. Back to the boom, and there's a final bit of assembly to do by fitting the auxiliary lifting head onto the end of the boom. This is another fiddly job, and it will be challenging to anyone with fingers the size of hot dog rolls. The lifting head is supported on the axle rods, which also hold the pulleys, so you've got to feed it all through in sequence and then secure the end of the axle with a clip. The clip is small and it's a little bit tough to push on, but once it's properly fitted it stays on well. With that done, the boom's fully assembled and we can now attach it onto the boom foot. And after that, the final operation is to attach all of the boom pendants so the boom can be lifted. The boom pendants are finely made wire pieces with a large loop at one end and a small loop at the other. And the only thing to watch for is that the crimped off ends of wire are actually quite sharp. To join the wires together, a special connector feeds into the large loop, and then the small loop of the adjacent wire is offered up into the open end of the connector. Again, this is all small scale engineering for fat scale fingers. To secure the connection, another set of the tiny brass nuts and bolts is used. And it's all good stuff because when the pendants are finally joined up, you've got a very nice piece of model engineering. The A-frame can now be cranked up, ready to lift the boom. We're near the end of the assembly now, and the last thing to do is to fit the two hooks. Some thread has been unwound from the two hoist winches and put over the boom top. And for the single line hook, it's a matter of just tying a simple knot in the end. The bigger hook has got a little more reeving to do because you need to pass the hook under the pulley, but it's all simple stuff which doesn't take long. Once it's all tied up, a snip with the scissors gets rid of all the loose ends. So we're now finally ready to raise the boom fully, and the thing to watch out for here are the boom stops, and you just have to make sure that the piston and jacket are fully interlocked before you go winding the boom fully up. With the boom up, the assembly is complete and the crane is ready for operation. To start the look at the detail, the metal crawler tracks are nicely made and they're mounted on detailed track frames with working rollers. The cab has got textured walkways outside and there are mirrors, lights and aerials. And the interior detailing is also of a high standard. The body panels are formed well with grills and door handles in the casting. There's a plastic access ladder on one side and the counterweight has nice graphics and paintwork. In fact, a particularly nice detail of the model is the high quality paintwork and its stunning livery. The top of the body looks convincing and there are some finely textured walkway surfaces. The boom sections are high quality castings and the pendants look good too. Metal pulleys are used throughout the model and the two hooks are high quality metal pieces also. We'll start the review in the CranesEtcTV test site and look at the crawler tracks first, and they are too stiff to roll on a smooth surface. They do roll well enough by hand, but they are on the tight side. Also underneath, the jacks do work and they are used if the crawler tracks are removed. In fact, it's not mentioned in the instructions, but the tracks are removable by taking off two plastic plates and unscrewing them. The other nice feature of the tracks is that they are extendable so they can be narrow for if the crane is on a low loader, and they can be widened out when the crane is actually working and lifting. The crane does rotate well without any rocking, although it is quite stiff. So forget any idea about putting it on your roof and using it as a weather vane. There's also a couple of smaller features which can be used, and one of them is the tilting cab, which allows the operator to work at heights without getting neck ache. And the second one is the exhaust pipe, which is lowered for transport reasons and can be raised for operation. So let's get out onto the CranesEtcTV piling site and carry out a genuine imitation real-life lifting test. Here the crane is hooked up to a Soletanche Bachy container, and it is actually quite a heavy load because that container is all made of metal. The winch is operated by using the key through the door, and as you can see the load is expertly lifted by the CranesEtcTV operator. This is quite a good test for the model because the container is heavy and it will hold it with the boom up without tipping over. In summary, this is another excellent version of the Liebherr 855 by NZG. It's got great detail and features and it looks terrific with other models in Soletanche Bachy colours. If you're looking for a really good crawler crane model, this one is outstanding.